just want to welcome everyone bright and early to our first ever virtual curator tour. Thank you so much for attending. There's a really wonderful presentation here for you, put together by Carrie and Mia and Anna. I think you'll really enjoy it. We'll see how this goes, and then hopefully in the future we'll keep doing these purely for staff to kind of revive our treasured staff curator tours. So I will pass it over to Carrie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Lisa, for sending out the invite, and for all of you for being here this morning. It's great to see you. As you know, I'm here. I have the pleasure of being here with Mia Matthias, who I've really enjoyed collaborating with on the exhibition, working together, the photographers of the Kamoinge workshop. I'm speaking to you today from Manhattan, which is the ancestral home of the Lenape. The name Manhattan comes from the Lenape word Mannahatta, meaning island of many hills. And before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the land where I am today, and to acknowledge the continued presence and vitality of Indigenous people throughout New York City. So we're here to talk to you about the exhibition on view, the Working Together Photographers of the Kamoinge workshop, which was originally organized by the the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, and was curated by Dr. Sarah Eckhart, who is the Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art there. About 4 years ago, the VMFA acquired the archives of Louis Draper, who was a really significant member of the Kamoinge workshop, and he was also a native of Richmond. And he died in 2002, and his sister, who still lives in Richmond, was responsible for his estate. The VMFA purchased his archive and began an extensive process of cataloging his estate, digitizing the materials in order to give them online access. And the materials in the archive are what inspired Sarah to organize the exhibition. And I want to show you a work. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, here it is. That's in the collection of the Whitney. That is a painting by Mel Leipzig of Louis Draper in his office at Mercer Community College in Trenton, New Jersey, where he taught from the 1980s until his death in 2002. And you can see all the fabulous papers around him that really are the basis of the archive. And Sarah gave the title of the show, or called the show, Working Together, Louis Draper and the Photographers of the Kamoinge workshop, really primarily because the show grew out of these amazing archives. And but the Whitney changed the title somewhat to make it focus more on all the 14 members more exclusively. So the Kamoinge workshop was a collective of 14 Black photographers who lived in New York City and initially came together in a spirit of friendship and support. And 9 of those members are still living and live in the New York area. Let's see if I can show you. And so that's, as I said, part of the reason why we decided to change the title, so it focuses more equally on them. And this is a more recent photograph shot at the Virginia Museum, and it includes all the living members with the exception of Ming Smith, who wasn't able to attend the opening. So the exhibition covers the first 2 decades of the collective, which was started in 1963, so it's 63 to 82. And that was a time that coincides with the Black Arts Movement and the Civil Rights Movement. And the members chose the name Kamoinge, which means a group of people acting together in the Gikuyu language or dialect of the Kikuyu people of Kenya. And the name really reflects the essential ideal of the collective, as well as the kind of global perspective that they had. In the early days, they met weekly to share their work, their critical perspectives, and technical and professional expertise. And their meetings often included intense philosophical and political discussions. They each had very different backgrounds and experience with photography, but they shared a common purpose, and that was to pursue photography as an art form and to make photographs of and for the Black community as they saw and experienced them, in contrast with how they were often portrayed in art, media, and the popular culture at that time. Louis Draper explained their perspective when he said, "We speak of our lives as only we can." Kamoinge as a collective is still in existence. However, the membership has changed and expanded, and it incorporated in the 90s and is now known as Kamoinge Inc. And Kamoinge Inc. as distinguished from Kamoinge Workshop, which is what the exhibition focuses on. When the Whitney decided to present this exhibition, we had only really two photographs by two of the early Kamoinge Workshop members in our collection. And I started to make studio visits with all of the living artists who you see here, to get to know them and their work. And they were incredibly generous with their time, telling me not only about their own work, but about the history of the workshop in general. And as a result of these visits, the museum was able to acquire a wonderful selection of photographs that we've incorporated into the exhibition. So the presentation at the Whitney includes work from the Virginia Museum, a small selection of works from lenders, as well as works from the Whitney's collection. When we started to lay out this show, it was March. I'm talking about the layout of the actual arrangement of the works in the show. It was March of 2020, just before we all began working from home. So the normal planning process was really quite different than usual. We had a great team. It consisted, of course, of Mia, and Lauren DiLoretto, who you all, I'm sure, know as a superb exhibition coordinator, and Anna Martin, who's a great exhibition designer. We started meeting weekly in the summer via Zoom, and that soon changed to twice weekly. In that process, we planned the layout of the show. Anna made extensive digital mock-ups of the space. And here's an aerial view that we wanted to show you that shows the layout. The show, as you probably know, is on the 8th floor. And this shows the organization of the exhibition in the space. As the planning progressed, our small team, of course, was joined by many other wonderful colleagues, many of you who are here. And I just want to call out some of those, because in working from home, it seems a little less obvious how interconnected we all are in our work. And my apologies in advance if I don't mention your name and you were involved. I thank you all, and it really takes the whole museum to put on a show. So in no particular order, I just want to give a big thanks, primarily by first names, to our great registrars, Reagan and Seth, our fabulous art handlers, Rob, who was our lead art handler, Graham, Mary Jean, Natalie, Royce, Gregory, and Joshua. The AV team, Reed, Lucas, Jihad, Eva, Mark Steigelman and the Carpenters, Matt and Joseph, are engineers who I drove absolutely crazy to get lighting done the way I wanted. David, Angelo, and Anthony, our great education department, and Bird, Catherine, who's no longer with us, Emma, Kate, our public programs team, Megan and Andy, Daima in education, Heather, Laura, Lons in publications, Beth Turk. In graphic design, our lead designer was John Gorman, who was great, Hillary, Ella. In communications, Caroline, Danielle, Lindsay, Erin, in our great digital content team who's still working really hard, Jackie, Casey, Kathy, Eliza, who's no longer with us, and Isaiah. In advancement, a huge team, and I'm only naming a few: Morgan, Ann Holcomb, Andrew, Gina, Michelle, Madison, and of course in administration, our great director, Adam Weinberg, Jen, Justin, Lily, Christy Putnam, Nick Holmes, Melanie Taylor, and in curatorial, especially Scott Rothkopf and David Breslin, who we had lots of discussions with, thanks to Jane Panetta, Emily Russell, Nectar Nichols, who's no longer with us, but did a lot of work early on, Jenny Goldman, who brought the show to curatorial initially from the VMFA, Elizabeth Sussman, Elizabeth Sherman, and Kelly Long, who helped us support and acquiring works through the photo committee, Chrissy Isles, Chrissy Mitchell, who was on the floor with us, Kelly Loftus, who did all the great matting for the show, Clara Rojas Sebesta and Heather Cox in conservation, Ferris and Ivy, Mika, and Ron, our great photographer, our entire security team who were here continually and who watch over us and the art. Our great visitor experience team, Adrian, Wendy, all the gallery assistants who show up every day, Jen Heslin and Laura Friedman in the library, and anyone else I failed to mention. Thank you all. You're fabulous. And thanks for your patience in letting me mention all of you. I really think it's amazing how many people are involved in an exhibition. So I just want to acknowledge you. And I'll go back to the show. Sarah Eckhart organized the show thematically. And although we mostly kept her thematic selections, we altered the installation somewhat. And she was a great colleague and very wonderful to work with. So now we go to what the show looks like. This is an image of the entrance to the exhibition. If you haven't seen it, it's in the center is a photograph, a group photograph by Anthony Barboza that was taken in 1973. And it really forms the visual introduction to the show. To the right of the entrance is a video monitor that plays contemporary interviews with each of the living artists. So as you enter the gallery, you have a sense of the artist in the 1970s and in the present. Our hope was to keep the voices of the artist as present as possible. Now, these interviews on the right-hand side are also available on the Whitney website. They were done by the VMFA, and they're really wonderful. So if you aren't able to get to the museum and are interested, you can access them on the website. So each section of the exhibition includes work by all the artists, and the first section is organized around the idea of community, meaning the artist community. One of the focal points as you enter the gallery are these wonderful portraits by Anthony Barboza of the 14 artists that were taken in 1972, just before the group's exhibition at the Studio Museum. They hang above an artist book that Anthony also made. It's an accordion style book, And each spread includes one of the portraits on the left-hand side, and on the right is a print of each artist's choosing. So each spread is bound by this single binding, and you can sort of see it here. Anthony made one book for each of the workshop members, and he gave them as Christmas gifts. And I think the book is a really wonderful reflection of the group. It clearly shows that each of the artists is a distinct individual, and yet they're connected and united in support of each other. Here's a close-up of the portraits, and you can see each of the artists' names individually listed here. Oops. Okay, I'm going to go back to this previous slide. In addition to the book, the community section has photographs that are organized into smaller groups or suites. I like to think of them really as conversations between images. And you can see that slightly here, the way that they are grouped. And now we'll go back. So many of the works in this section were taken on the street, and they were not staged. They were really shot spontaneously, and in many cases are the result of like a split-second impulse that was informed, as many of the artists have told me, by their eye, body, mind, and heart. As Sean Walker, one of the artists, said, the way we approach photography was improvisational. I know what I'm going to play, but I don't know the notes I'm going to play. And I should also say they were also informed by really a keen awareness of art history, including photography, film, music, literature, theater, and basically the arts in general. This photograph in the community section show a wide range of people on the street, people working, as in this great photograph by Buford Smith that's actually in the Whitney's collection, or resting or visiting with friends, as in this wonderful image by Ming Smith. Some of the photographs show people during a special occasion, and also depict an incredible sense of style in their dress and gestures, as in this photograph by Sean Walker. There are images of people moving through the city that also include details like text or markings on building walls, as in Herman Howard's Sweet as a Peach, named after one of the advertisements on the wall. There are photographs of children playing on the street, as in Calvin Wilson's photograph on the left and Buford Smith's on the right. Some of the photographs are of children playing, also depict the city in the background, as in this photograph that thankfully is in the Whitney collection of that was taken on the Lower East Side of kids playing in what appears to be this like devastated environment behind them. In contrast, some of the photographs have a quiet and lyrical quality, as in this beautiful image by Adger Cowens taken on a snowy day. There are also quiet interior shots, like this beautiful photograph by Ray Francis. And photographs that depict intimate friends and family, like Anthony Barbosa's photograph on the left, also in the Whitney collection, and Herb Randall's on the right. There's also a small selection of portraits. Some of them are of the artists themselves or of their family or friends, as well as a very contemporary group of photographs of students. And you can see those in this great case that Anna designed. Many of the Kamoinge artists taught photography, and here you can see them up closely, in youth programs in Harlem and Bed-Stuy. And the mentoring they did in photography provided a younger generation with the technical and philosophical knowledge that could facilitate their representation of their own communities. And here are portraits by Louis Draper on the left and Danny Dawson of teen on the right, of teens who participated in these programs. In this show are two portfolios, and the Kamoinge Workshop published their own portfolios, one in 1964 and one in 65. And we're presenting a selection of prints from each of those. The workshop distributed these portfolios to universities, libraries, and museums, placing them in institutions that had not yet collected their work. And here's an install shot of them. One's in a case and one's on the wall. We're also showing a selection of exhibition announcements, and that's what's in the case here. In support of the Black community, and in order to address their exclusion from mainstream art galleries and museums, Kamoinge members opened an exhibition space in the Marketplace Gallery on West 139th Street that they renamed the Kamoinge Workshop Gallery. They organized 3 exhibitions in 1965 around particular themes, and we have announcements from 2 of these exhibitions. There's a close-up of what was in the case. Institutional support of the workshop increased during the early years, and members participated in group shows, including exhibitions at the County Cullen Library, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the International Center of Photography. And we have announcements for these exhibitions as well.
So I'm just going to speak briefly to the music section that we have, which is pictured here. And it is a small but mighty selection, I would say, because it really can't be overstated how important music was as a source of inspiration to all of the photographers. We have numerous quotes speaking to the fact that they met every Sunday and there was just a jazz soundtrack every Sunday to all of their meetings. And this section is also really indicative of how the photographers were looking outside of visual art for inspiration in their photography. So you'll see here a Danny Dawson image, and I think we have multiple quotes from Danny Dawson speaking to the fact that they were looking to these jazz musicians as this pinnacle of experimentation within Black artistry. So in addition to images that you'll find of Mahalia Jackson, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, they were also listening to Charlie Parker, to Thelonious Monk, to Lester Young. So really kind of gravitating towards people who were pushing the boundaries of the form and trying to incorporate that into their work. And I think that that is really embodied in this kind of iconic Ming Smith photo of Sun Ra. And you can see how she's actually capturing the essence of his sound and using experimentation, spontaneity, improvisation, dynamism, this movement in how she decides to capture this portrait of sorts of Sun Ra. So it really was kind of a binding agent for a lot of them where they were looking for inspiration.
So we included this slide to give you a sense, this installation slide of what the gallery space is like, looking from the community section to the other end of the floor. There are 3 different colors, actually wall colors in the exhibition. So as you move from the community section to the central gallery, which I'll talk about next, the color shifts ever so slightly to a light gray, and then the final gallery is this dark gray. So this is the central gallery, which is focused on works that emphasize abstract and surreal elements in the artist's work. And although these qualities are really visible in work that's hung elsewhere, this section focuses expressly on the aesthetic elements of their work. Alfanar, one of the Kamoinge artists, described long arguments within the group about whether or not, because a photographer is Black, he has to deal with subjects that are germane to Black experience. He indicated that these debates could never be resolved as a group. Rather, each individual developed their own aesthetic approach. And this section speaks specifically to some of the general aesthetic elements of their work, such as abstraction and surrealism. And it includes photographs such as this one by Sean Walker, taken outside of the Tiffany store on Fifth Avenue, that has strong surrealist elements. And works like this that by Buford Smith that emphasize abstract qualities in extreme contrasts of black and white. And this was taken in a park near the artist's home at that time on the Lower East Side on a snowy day, and the silence in this image is almost palpable. There are also photographs like this one of Ming Smith, in which the light and shadow create striking abstract forms within the image. Other photographs in this section emphasize abstract elements of the body, as in this stunning work by Adger Cowens, or within features of the face, as in this incredible photograph by Anthony Barboza of Grace Jones. The tight framing and precise lighting turns her image into an abstraction of sorts. There are also photographs that read as purely abstract, as in this image called Salt Pile by Al Fanar from 1971. And Fanar took this photograph of a salt pile somewhere in the Midwest during a cross-country summer family road trip. And Fanar is best known for his abstract images. And he said of him, and I quote, "My approach to photography has always been sort of Zen-like. Instead of going with a frame of reference, I try to go out with no ideas about what I want to do." Another photograph in this section that reads as abstract is this photograph by Louis Draper. It's actually an image of some kind of fabric that's hanging. However, the similarity in the form to white hoods that were worn by Ku Klux Klan and the work's title, which is Congressional Gathering, imbues this otherwise abstract image with social connotations.
So I think that provides the perfect segue into the civil rights section, which is in the last gallery of the exhibition. And this is a shot of the Malcolm X cloud, which is on the right, as well as an image of the well-known orator, Porkchop Davis. And then here we have a wider image of what you'll actually see when you walk into the gallery. Oops. And I think that in approaching this section, you can reference an interview done by our amazing colleagues in education, Anne and Emma, in which Danny Dawson and Jimmy Manis have these quotes where they talk about the fact that they were not civil rights photographers, but they were doing civil rights. So because of the fact that they were Black photographers focused on capturing their own communities, their work was inherently political at the time. And this section spans from 1963 through 1976, and it captures these really iconic moments. The photographers traveled to Mississippi during the Freedom Summer. They traveled to DC for the March on Washington. They have these images of these really iconic speakers, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer. But in addition to that, there is resistance to the mainstream narrative of the time, and resistance to kind of the sensationalist violence of how the civil rights movement would have been depicted otherwise. And you really also get a sense of how they're approaching this and engaging with the movement in their own individual ways with their own individual styles. There's this really amazing Ming Smith photo, and as well, you'll see here a Sean Walker image that kind of gives you a sense of how they're very much rooted in their own communities. This was taken in Harlem following riots of police wearing riot gear. And then you have images that are really, again, rooted in these iconic locations and capturing these well-known figures, but as well kind of centering the community. And that's very much present in this next image here, taken by Adric Howans, who has this incredibly cinematic way of capturing, of photographing. And it has this, his photos have a drama to them. So here, instead of focusing on Malcolm X and kind of forefronting the icon, the central speaker, he instead has this aerial view that's looking down at the crowd. And then you get a sense of the immensity of the community that's gathered to hear his message, which kind of shifts the focus from the one person to the spread of the movement that they're trying to start here. And kind of on the flip side, you have this image also taken by Adric Howans of Betty Shabazz and Percy Sutton at Malcolm X's funeral. And again, not what you would have seen in the mainstream media at the time. You have this really quiet portrayal of grief, of mourning, and it was captured because he was walking around the streets in mourning of Malcolm X at that time. So very much within his community with this sense of intimacy. And in addition to photographing within their communities, a number of the photographers also traveled nationally. So you have this image here of Lewis Draper's of Fannie Lou Hamer taken in Mississippi. And additionally, these next two images here are by Herb Randall, who received a John Hay Whitney Fellowship to travel with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to Mississippi during what is now known as the Freedom Summer. And it was a summer that was, as we know, marked by white supremacist violence. And instead here, you have these quiet portrayals of the community that Herb Randall was living in and working in at the time. And the image on the right is just really remarkable in the layers of textures, the pine needles in the foreground, the grass kind of encircling the figure in the background. And this is actually in the Whitney's collection. And if you have time, I would definitely suggest going to the galleries and spending some time with this image, because it is really striking and also is just an incredible counterpoint to what you would have seen and what we have seen of the Freedom Summer. And all of these images, although they're not homogenous, they do embody the qualities both of the civil rights movement and of what the Kamoinge workshop was trying to do, of representing their own communities, of self-determination. And they present an alternative to the mainstream media at the time, and even now. And that also is a great segue into their international travel. So in addition to traveling nationally, the photographers were also at the time really interested in looking at the roots of African-American culture and kind of exploring the diaspora. So this is a wide view, and you'll actually notice it in the galleries, they're grouped according to location. So you have images starting from the right in Guyana, taken in Senegal, in Jamaica, in Cuba, and in actually in the US. And this is a closer shot here of the group taken in Senegal and the group taken in Jamaica. And there wasn't necessarily one homogenous aesthetic influence that they were looking for when they traveled. It was an opportunity for them to kind of explore Black identity beyond the US context. And they were all able to travel for various reasons. So for instance, Jimmy Manis here, Lewis Draper, Manny Dawson, Sean Walker, they were all filmmakers. So Jimmy Manis was in Guyana, able to travel to Guyana because he was filming a documentary at the time, and he stayed there for 5 years, building community dark rooms and kind of teaching photography to the communities there. And you'll also notice that a lot of the photographers were interested in traveling to the continent, so to Africa, as well to countries that had recently gained independence from colonial hold. So Guyana, for instance, became independent in 1966, and Jamaica gained independence in 1962. And this is a Herb Robinson image from Jamaica in 1973, and he's actually a Jamaican. So this was a great opportunity for him to return to the place that he was from for the first time since he was a child. And as I mentioned, Sean Walker was a filmmaker, and he was in Cuba filming for Third World Newsreel when he captured this image. And you can see the influence of his filmmaking on his photography. There's a really cinematic quality, as if you're almost looking at stills at times. And these last two images here are taken in Senegal. Anthony Barboza, Louis Draper, and Ming Smith all had the opportunity to travel to Senegal. And you just get these really gorgeously composed images of their time there. Anthony Barboza and Ming Smith both traveled for commercial photography reasons. Anthony Barboza was a commercial photographer. Ming Smith was a successful model. And then there's this Louis Draper image here of a scene that includes a movie poster taken in Dakar. So this was just really an opportunity for them to expand their notions of Blackness beyond the US context, which was something they were very much interested in at the time.
We have two other important groups of archival materials in the show I just wanted to mention before we close. One is a case with 4 issues of the Black Photographers Annual. This we've put in the abstraction and surrealist room, not because they were particularly focused on those issues. There are some works hanging in that gallery that are included in the Black Photographers Annual, but this seemed to be the best location for them, and you can see the case here. Let me see if I can progress this. Okay, here's a close-up of the annuals. These publications, while not in a kind of a formal workshop project, were founded by Buford Smith, one of the Kamoinge photographers, and many of the members were picture editors for the publications. And they featured the work of 118 different Black photographers, many of whom were also Kamoinge members. The Virginia Museum digitized these publications, and if you look on the Whitney website for the Working Together exhibition, in the archival section, it will take you to a page where you can access the interior pages. They are amazing publications, and I highly recommend you taking a look. We had hoped to show them digitally in the exhibition, but with the pandemic, we had to sort of change our plans because it would have required people physically touching things that we thought might not be the most appropriate in these circumstances. But they're really important publications, and I highly recommend you taking a look. The show also includes this case, which is in the global section, that focuses on another group called the International Black Photographers. And it was a group formed by a number of the Kamoinge members, and was inspired by their international travels to form this larger group with an international scope. The group hosted dinners honoring outstanding elders of Black photography, such as Roy DeCrava, Gordon Parks, P.H. Polk, and others. And we've included 4 photographs taken by Anthony Barboza of those dinners, each of the 4 years. And they're pretty amazing images. Again, this is on the website if you're not able to go to the exhibition. And I'm going to end with this current photograph, with the exception of Ming Smith, of all the members I've taken about a year ago in Virginia. And just in closing, I also want to say that the exhibition really aims to highlight the distinct voices as well as the collective concerns of the group, and to celebrate the workshop's importance, place in the history of photography, the artists self-organizing, their commitment to their community, and their centering of Black experiences in their art is as relevant to the current moment as it was in the 1960s and 70s. So I hope you've enjoyed this tour and that you'll come to the Whitney if you can to see the exhibition before it closes. March 28th. And if not, please take a look at the website. Our digital media team has done a tremendous job of showing the photographs and the archival materials. And the education department, I should say, is planning some great events with the artists. And I hope you all can attend that as well. And so thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have now.
Amazing. I just kind of one question. I don't know how quick it will be, but to the Black Photographers Annual, it kind of seems like while they were doing this and sort of being outside and forced out of the mainstream of art, like was it as important to them, obviously with the annual, to like document and record all of this work as it was to be out there doing it in a fashion like participating in the civil rights movement? Did they have as like strong an emphasis on capturing and having a documented history? Is kind of my comment question.
I don't know if they were really trying to document per se. You know, they were not documentary photographers. I mean, they were representing the time, representing the community, and I think very, very much committed to collaborating with and making visible other Black photographers. But I don't know if I'd use the word document. I don't know. What about you, Mia? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that most of them didn't see themselves as documenting at the time, but they all have a different sensibility about it. So for instance, Lou Draper, who you saw the painting of earlier, like he was like inherently just very much focused on creating this kind of comprehensive archive. And even as they were working and photographing, would take notes, would keep meeting minutes during meetings. So I think they had a sense that what they were doing was important and wanted to keep track of it. But I think they were still very much forefronting the artistry of it before thinking about it as documentation, if that makes sense.
I guess
Totally.
I might also add that in addition to Draper, which Mia mentioned, I think that Sean Walker and also Anthony Barboza were really interested in the history and in the kind of larger art community that was around them, and kind of also developed their own personal archives in a way of both.
Thanks, Mia and Carrie. It's just so great to get a little deeper look. I loved seeing the picture that they took in January, and three of them have like cameras in their hands still.
Oh yes,
it's awesome. It's just great. Yeah. So just a thank you, and the show is just gorgeous.
Oh, thank you, Heather.
Awesome. Well, yeah, a huge thank you to Carrie, Mia, Anna, Lisa, everyone else in a long list of individuals who contributed to that was so great, Carrie. I was just smiling the whole time. Thanks to all of you for coming and making this first foray a success. Hope you enjoyed it, and a good way to start off your day, and great to be with the art even when we can't. So thank you everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. And if you have any other questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear them, Matt. It's great to see you.